Everybody joining me this week on the show is Blake Lovell. You can check them out over at the Southeastern 14 when they cover all things SEC football, basketball, baseball. They've got the SEC covered. And something we talk about a lot here at NFL. You can check out his NFL podcast, Established the Pass. And Blake is always good to talk to where we're talking SEC stuff, talking NFL, whatever sports related. We were talking some wrestling before we hit the
Yes,
record button. So it's always good to have you on the show, Blake.
we were, Philip, and I always appreciate you joining me, or me joining you. Sorry, the other way around. I feel like we're doing this late, and so just for everyone out there, like we have, it's my fault, by the way. Like we have rescheduled this like multiple times throughout the day, and I kept saying, Philip, I'm sorry, I'm almost done. I promise I can do this. And now we're like doing this late at night. I'm like, I don't know how many videos I've recorded today. Philip's probably the same. It's just like it all runs together. So we're both joining each other. How about that? But no, I always appreciate it. Yeah, there's no lack of anything going on right now, so there's plenty to discuss, and definitely a fun time of year here as we get obviously now to the Super Bowl and basketball's heating up, and yeah, just lots of stuff going on.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'll kind of pull back the curtain. I'll tell people time. So during college football season, I'm very big. I have two TVs and usually an
Yeah.
iPad or a laptop. So when college football ended, I said, I probably won't be doing this anymore. And then this past week happened because I'm trying to and keeping up what's going on with the SEC Big 12 Challenge. I'm obviously we're doing wrestling, watching the Royal Rumble. The NFLPA game was on, so I was trying to checking in on that. So I said, yeah, the two TV thing is it has not been retired, and it won't be anytime soon because when it gets to tournament time, one TV will be on one of the channels, and the other TV will be on the March Madness app that's
Yeah,
on the smart TV. So
that's the
always
way
at
to do
full
it.
blast. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Oh, people always say, how do you focus on more than one game? I said, it can be a challenge, but it can happen.
It's a skill. It's a skill. You learn it over time, but it's one you never master. I can tell you that. So trying to watch two games, it's hard to do, but yeah, that's what you have to do though. There's so much these days. So
Yeah, there's so much going on, and then you just kind of check it all out. But let's start with the NFL stuff. The conference championship games on Sunday, and Blake, I thought both games would be good. Uh, I think everybody thought that. The NFL was hoping that. And I guess we can start with the NFC Championship game. I have a feeling there's not a lot to really break down with this one, but just Eagles win 31-7. Just what stood out to you in this one?
well, I mean, it is one of those games that, like you said, I think this one was. I mean, both games we talked about it before. It's like these were the exact two matchups I think you could have asked for. Like these were the twos that looked the best on paper, and you're just thinking, wow, that we're actually going to get this. We're going to get two classics here in these championship games. Well, yeah, this one didn't turn out that way, and I mean, let's be honest. Like I think that the Niners all season long, the thing has been the defense has been great, of course. Obviously they've changed quarterbacks a lot, and yet the thing that's always stood out for them is they just have so many guys that can break a big play at any time. And in this game, that didn't happen. Like they didn't have just those huge, 40 plus yard type plays that you feel like you've seen from McCaffrey, Debo, Kittle, Ayuk. Like go down the line, right? All of these guys, just you feel like that's what's helped get them here. And why does that happen? Well, I mean, we know a big part of that is Brock Purdy gets injured early, and it just kind of I think, we always say like the impact that can have on a game when you just think about a team that has adjusted to different quarterbacks this season. But really, you think about it in the landscape of like, think about how much preparation goes into this game itself and knowing you're one game away and then you lose your starting quarterback that you had just started kind of getting into a rhythm with, and they played so well. And then it's just like everything just kind of just deflates you. And, it's not to say that this is Josh Johnson's fault, right? Like it's not in any way, shape, or form, but it's just one of those things just kind of completely changes the dynamic of the game. And if you know that's going to happen, then the issue becomes, well, oh yeah, you've also got to stop the Eagles. And well, that's not exactly something that was easy to do either. Now you get, three turnovers, that certainly plays a factor and all of that, but it just felt like one of those that from the start, right? Just the way the game kind of changes early. The Eagles come out and score 5 minutes into the game. We never would have thought it would be a dominant win like this, but really with the way it played out, and again, you just kind of saw how the second half, or really, I guess, the end of the second quarter on. I mean, that's where too, right? It's like if you're
Yeah.
looking at this game, the last 2 minutes of the second quarter, everything changes, and that again is one where in a game like this where you've already lost your quarterback, those kind of things, like it can be such a completely deflating thing. And I think when you go into halftime down a touchdown versus two touchdowns, it's a completely different story, right? And so I just one of those games where everything sort of aligned for the Eagles, and some people thought they'd been the best team all year long, and they're the best team from the NFC going to the Super Bowl now. So
Yeah, it really was one of those games. I was thinking about as we're just watching it, anything that could go wrong for the 49ers,
yeah,
it did. I mean, just like you said, the Brock Purdy injury started it. And even Josh Johnson, I mean, he had some good throws in there in the first half. Like he wasn't like horrible all the time, but the delay of
yeah,
game penalties that happened when he was in the game. And then also at the end of the first half, it's 14-7. The Eagles do go on that long drive after the 49ers had tied it, which is like, okay, it's 14-7. Kyle Shanahan, if not the best, one of the best play callers, offensive minds in the game. He can figure something out, and then
yeah,
boom, second half comes, and then he hits his head on the ground. He's gone. And then we always people jokes of well, our people that change, man, our quarterback cannot throw the ball. They literally had a situation where they did not have a quarterback that could throw the ball because I believe
yeah,
Purdy only threw one pass when he came back, and it was a screen pass. So it was just one of them deals. Give the Eagles credit. I've kind of talked to some friends that are some Eagle fans today, and they weren't happy with my comments. So, well, you beat a team that didn't have literally did not have a quarterback, but they did what they had. Hey, it's not their fault. It's not their
right.
fault. But
No,
it's just, man, I actually, I felt depressed like watching this game. It was like, wow, this
yeah,
is it. I was at my parents' house actually watching the first game, and then I was going to pick a point where I could leave and go back to my apartment, and for the AFC Championship game, middle of the fourth quarter. All right, I can go now.
I mean, it really was right. Like it was just a game that we always say like, and I feel like the Niners had been on like the positive end of that, and some of those games that they had during that stretch was once like the momentum just got rolling in their favor, it's like whoever they were playing just couldn't stop them. And this was like the complete opposite, where everything started going against them, and they just could not find any way to sort of get out of that. Again, minus the Christian McCaffrey
Hmm.
play that made it 7-7. And you're thinking, all right, we got a little momentum here, and then everything changes in the final 2 minutes of the first half, and just sent it sent things in the wrong direction for the Niners. Bad break, but you know what? It's a team that when you think about kind of the bad breaks they had early in the season, and then to rebound and play the way they did from basically October, I think it was October 23rd on. That's when they lost to the Chiefs, and then from there they just reeled off all these wins. And so yeah, it's a disappointing loss and disappointing with the way it played out. But like you said, I don't think you take anything away from the Eagles because most people thought they were the best team all year long, and once they got back healthy, they win this game in dominant fashion, and here they are back in the Super Bowl. So
And what was interesting with them, they didn't really run Jalen Hurts on
no,
Sunday either. Not till their last touchdown drive when they go up 31-7, they get to 31 points. That was really the only time they really used him in the run game. It was the running backs and then him actually throwing the ball. And
no,
obviously his injury with his shoulder, they're still protecting that now. To less than 2 weeks, Super Bowl, he'll be more healthy. You think that will be more part of the game, but that was the thing too. We expect to see them run the ball him a lot, but they didn't do that on Sunday.
no, didn't do it a lot at all. And I think again that was something where you factor that in. This was not a and we probably expected this given the two defenses, but like this was not a game with big plays. And I
Mm-mm.
feel like we usually see that in some of these playoff type games when you get to this point where it's like you see just a big, 50-yard play or something. But like it was both teams were locked in. I mean, I know the 49ers gave up 31 points, but in terms of limiting the big plays, I feel like everybody just kind of, I was looking down I don't remember what the number was. They said the stat. I don't think anyone had a big play over 29 yards offensively, which, 29 yards may seem like a lot, but when you think about the playmakers on both sides, like it just everybody was kind of locked in, especially for the Eagles, and that was just a big part of the game. They didn't let the other guys. I even go beyond the quarterback situation. They didn't let the other guys beat them. They didn't let them just all of a sudden break away for these huge plays. And on the flip side, Jalen Hurts just kind of did what he had to do, and yeah, that was taking care of business for the Eagles. So
With the 49ers, I think this is going to be a very interesting offseason for them with quarterback because you look at what they did with Brock Purdy, then come out on Monday. Adam Schefter, ESPN, reported UCL. I hope I said that right.
yeah,
Ligament tear on his arm. Could be a 6-month recovery process with that one. And then, of course, the Trey Lance side of this, because as great as Brock Purdy or as good as he played for them, at the end of the day, he was the last pick in the draft. There
yeah.
is a more of a financial investment into Trey Lance. Not only did they draft him high, they traded up. They traded picks to get him. So that's going to be interesting to me, I think, going into the offseason, mini camp, training camp, into the preseason next season. Like, what do the 49ers do with their quarterback situation?
Well, it is, again, it's become way more interesting than we would have expected because it's like you think about how, and you just said it, like think about how different the conversation is for all these quarterbacks now. Like you can even start with Jimmy G because it's like, there was a point where it's all right, we got to get rid of this guy. Then it's like, boy, we're lucky we kept this guy. And now it's like, well, we got to keep this guy again because, but then you look around, it's like, well, all right, what do we do with Trey Lance? We just spent this high draft pick on him. I mean, it's like, and you know how it is, right? Like fans, one game of Trey Lance, like, wow, he's not that good. Like he's, it's just he's not great. Well, yeah, he played one game or whatever, and then get hurt. I don't think it's a very unfair just to all of a sudden the Niners aren't just going to cut bait with Trey Lance. Let's be honest, that's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so yes, it becomes a situation where, and I feel like we've been in this situation before, right? It's like Brock Purdy's now the guy. But at one point, it's like Nick Mullins was the guy there, where he just starts, he starts playing well, and then I feel like that's kind of been a theme where, somebody gets hurt for the Niners at quarterback, some other guy steps in that maybe some people have never heard of, and all of a sudden he plays really well and ends up having a fine career in the NFL. I could see the same situation here from Brock Purdy because, it is an interesting dynamic because, like you said, all three kind of have a case to be made for why they are extremely valuable to the 49ers. But again, because they are that valuable, somebody else is going to realize that. And, it's just like it becomes an interesting dynamic heading into the offseason.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one to leave. See, whoever Kyle Shanahan puts at quarterback, as long as they can actually throw the football,
Yeah.
he's able to figure
As long
out.
as they can just hand it off, that's all he cares about. Like, just let him hand the thing off. He'll be fine. So,
Yeah. So now the second game didn't have any issues with quarterbacks throwing the ball. The AFC Championship game where the Chiefs beat the Bengals 23-20. I admit I picked the Bengals going into this one
I did too, Phillip.
because of the Mahomes situation. I didn't have a good day on Sunday. Both my picks were wrong.
Yeah.
Obviously, the big storyline or the big talking point after this game was Joseph Asai late hit on Patrick Mahomes, but I'm sure we'll talk about that. But just overall, like I asked you with the NFC Championship, what was your big takeaways from the Chiefs beating the Bengals?
Yeah, this was an interesting game because, was it as exciting as, the games from maybe a year ago? Maybe not, of course, but this was just interesting the way it played out because, I think early on you sensed the Chiefs sort of had the Bengals number, but there was never really a point where you felt like the Chiefs were just going to put them away. Like you're like the Bengals are going to do something here, and
Mm.
they're probably going to make a big play, and that's what happened. When Jamar Chase is on the field, it's going to happen, right? It's just you're going to have a big play, T Higgins and those guys, and I think that's kind of what you saw where they just eventually, made it work. So, but I thought it was kind of interesting. It's almost like the Mahomes thing just threw everyone into like, how is this game going to play out? You just really didn't know because you had the unknowns there, and even when they're like, all right, he's going to play, he'll be fine. You're like thinking, come on, there's no way, right? Like he can't be just perfectly fine. And as we saw, he wasn't. I mean, there were still obviously some limitations there, but what did the Chiefs do? They said, eh, he's our guy. We're in the biggest game of the season. We're one away from the Super Bowl. We're putting it in his hands, and that's it. Like that's the game because they only ran the ball outside of I guess McKinnon had what 4 carries. Pacheco had 10. I mean, that's just kind of the game you knew it would be. Like they were going to put it in Patrick Mahomes' hand, whether he's 100% or not, get it to the playmakers, which of course, Marquez Valdez-Scantling just has a monster game, which is exactly what they needed, knowing what the game plan was going to be from the Bengals. You can game plan around Travis Kelce and all that, but it's still impossible to stop him, as we know. But like all those things came into play, and yet, you're going to that fourth quarter and you're thinking, this is how it's going to play out. It's like these two teams are sitting there, as my dog is apparently excited as well for this game and the Chiefs moving on. But they're sitting there. You just don't know how this thing's going to play out. When you get to the fourth quarter, the Bengals make their move, and I mean, it's like, where do you start in terms of like all the things that played out here? Because I think the Bengals had their chances, Chiefs had their chances, and it just happened to be at the end. I know the penalties were talked about, those kind of things, and questionable restarts and all this, like replays, whatever it was. Like, there's just that kind of stuff I know is going to be mentioned, but it almost felt like it's, whoever kind of puts themselves in a position to have the ball last was going to win this game. And that's kind of what ended up happening, right? Where it's maybe the game doesn't play out exactly what you expect, but it's just how the game gets to that point. Just a weird dynamic, but give the Chiefs credit. I thought, the defense stepped up and made some big plays, and that was going to be the name of this game. Kind of knowing where Mahomes was, which again, he was still fine, but it was all going to be about the defense, and they stepped up. They limited just those huge plays. They gave up some big plays, but to get, two interceptions, just two interceptions out of Burrow, like that's kind of enough in a game like this. So I thought that was just, there's so many things you could pick out, but the Chiefs defense was huge here, especially in the big kind of moments. So
I think this game showed us, we look at Patrick Mahomes, and when you think of Patrick Mahomes, you think about him running around, the no look passes, the crazy plays that,
yeah,
only him and just maybe very few players have ever been able to make. But this was a game where I think it shows on the bad ankle. I mean, really, he only run on that last play, which got the penalty that led to the game one field goal. I mean, 29 of 43, 326, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Like, I think this game showed that how much he has grown as just a pure pocket passer. Like, he pretty much played this game strictly from the pocket. And he still, I mean, he had a tremendous game. And when he was down several wide receivers in this game as well.
yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, right? It's there came a point where it's like, well, how much better can this guy get? Because it's always the same question. It's like, well, he's so good. He's so good. Well, yeah. I mean, but there's always, as we know, there's always room for improvement in different areas, especially when you're an NFL quarterback. Like, there's so many different things you can look at, and there's no doubt, like for him, that's been something. Wow, I was like, look how great this guy is on the run, and look at these amazing passes he makes that no one else can make when he's out of the pocket. Well, hey, what about in the pocket? You're gonna have to make some plays like that, and that's kind of what it came down to, was to be able to kind of do that, and I think that's just continued evolution of his individual game, and it's a big part of it because, as you know, like there are going to be teams that are able to put him in that position where, and especially if the other teams can do that, or if he's injured, it's one of those two things where he's going to have to do things a little bit different than maybe is natural for him as someone who can scramble out of the pocket and make all these amazing plays. So, yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. And again, you just we can say, well, there's just, you can watch the game and know he's not 100%. Like, it's just, he wasn't, but yet he's still able to put his team in a position to get exactly where they needed to be to get back to the Super Bowl. So people can doubt Mahomes all they want. They can, it's just, he did it again, and here they are back in the Super Bowl with a chance to win another one.
Yeah, and so much for the people who went this year. I'm one of them that said this offense will not be the same without Tyreek Hill.
I was the same too. Yep. It's just, I thought the same. I just kept thinking, how can you take a guy like that out, knowing what defenses have to do to prepare, and you just take that out of the mix, and you're looking at this receiving group, and you're like, well, Juju Smith-Schuster, okay, he can be good, but obviously wasn't great. The Steelers now much better passing offense than he was before. Valdez-Scantling, he was in a good passing offense, didn't really do a whole lot. You got Travis Kelce, but everyone else just kind of, even Kadarius Toney. You're just looking at it. These are good players, but a largely unproven group, and so you just didn't know what they were going to do without Tyreek Hill. You take him out, and yet here they are. They're back. Like, it's incredible.
Really, and lastly, and you mentioned defense. I mean, they had 5 sacks on Joe
Yep.
Burrow. I mean, and look, everybody said, well, they had 2 backup offensive linemen. That offensive line had no issues against Buffalo Bills the week
Yep.
before, and then also, I mean, Chris Jones was big. That big sack there,
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. Yep.
that made them punt to give the ball back to Kansas City. And then also, I think they did a pretty good job on Jamar Chase. He had that big catch on the 4th and 6. He was double covered, but I think other than that, I mean, you can only hold him in check so much.
Yeah.
But I think the Chiefs did a fantastic job, and that on that side of it too as well with Jamar Chase, and of course T Higgins seemed to the go-to guy most again for Burrow. But the Chiefs came out, I think, played a pretty solid defensive effort too, going up against what the Bengals have as weapons.
I mean, Chris Jones was huge, like you said. That sack, I mean, and just the pressure he was able to get, that can change a lot. And it kind of just came down to that point late in the game where you're like, well, this is a Chris Jones play. Like if they're going to make a play to get a stop, it has to be him. And what do you know? Like he is the one that makes probably easily one of the biggest plays of the game. There late, so yeah. Again, credit the defense because this was one where I think they had to have the kind of defensive performance they had, or else they probably don't win the game. And even then, it's a struggle to win the game. So yeah, just it's just you think about this team and the variety of ways they've won games this season, and this was just another one where they just happen to make enough plays, but the defense steps up and just makes some huge ones down the stretch there against a team that had just been red hot, and that's how you get to this point.
So, lastly, obviously, I told you off air when I asked you to make a pick for this game. I know you'll be doing that on your show next week, and it's almost 2 weeks away before these two teams play. But just what's your initial thoughts on Chiefs versus Eagles?
Yeah, it is going to be something because, again, this is like the matchup, I think, going into the playoffs. Like you're thinking Chiefs, Eagles, Bills, Eagles, maybe Bengals, Eagles. Like Eagles are there. All like it was hard to pick against them. I know a lot of people picked the Niners, but just, how that game played out, we're not surprised. But, based on the early injury and such, but it's just like the Eagles, I think, are a team that, it's almost like I don't want to say people undervalue them, but I think you just kind of forget how good they've been this season. And I know that's crazy to say about a team in a Super Bowl, but I don't know. Like, it's just one of those things where I think you just keep looking at it and you're like, when they had Jalen Hurts, whenever they're kind of healthy and they got their guys in there, like the Eagles, I mean, look at the 2 playoff games, right? And I know we can make the excuse about the Niners and talk about the injury, but they went 38-7, 31-7. Like they just dominate these two teams. And I thought the Giants would give them a game. Like I really did. I thought Giants playing well, just won in Minnesota. They're going to make this a game. They didn't. The Niners, yes, I know we can point to the quarterback thing, but still, like it's still a one-sided game. And so I think that's what intrigues me the most coming into this because, like you said, the Chiefs, I think probably are still thinking, well, a lot of people doubted us, even, having Patrick Mahomes, wondering if we were going to be the same, like we just talked about without Tyreek Hill. And here they are. But I'm just very curious to see kind of the two defenses because we just said it. I mean, they were kind of the theme beyond just the Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes talk, right? Like the AJ Brown and Travis Kelsey and just so forth. The defenses were the story in these two games. And I think that becomes just a fascinating matchup when you look at the two coordinators and say, all right, how do we match up and how do we figure this out to kind of, are the Eagles going to win 31-7 against the Chiefs? I don't think so. But it's like, well, I mean, it's a good team. And I think just defensively, I'm very curious to see how each team sort of schemes to limit the big plays from the obvious guys that can get them there. I think that's one of the most fascinating storylines heading into this one.
So we talked about stuff happening weekend. So before I let you go, we're going to transition to SEC basketball. Of course, as I said off the top, also people check you out over the Southeastern 14. The final SEC Big 12 challenge did not go the SEC's way with the Big 12 winning 7 out of 10. Just I'm going to ask you. This is a very super sports talk radio question, Blake, but I'll ask it. For the
That's
audience.
fine.
What
It's your
does this
show,
say?
Phillip.
That's it. My name's up there. What does this say about the SEC?
Well, I think this year it says the SEC is not as good as we thought it would be. I think that was pretty clear even in non-conference play. I think it's pretty clear that just the league was not going to have the top level teams, as many top level teams we could have expected. Alabama, Tennessee, top level. I think A&M's getting there, and I don't think people want to admit it, but I think A&M's getting there. I don't think teams like Auburn, Kentucky, Arkansas are in that category right now. And I think we all expected those three teams to be in there. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing. And I think it also says, about the Big 12. I know it's an SEC question, but I think it's pretty clear the Big 12 is the best conference. And we knew that coming into this thing. I thought the SEC was going to struggle. And again, I think sometimes when you watch a league or you just cover one league like we do with the SEC, on our Southeastern 14 stuff, you tend to be more pessimistic, I think, because you're like, well, I've seen the good with this team, but man, I've seen the bad. And so when you get in these kind of games, you tend to think, well, I'm going to actually lean on the bad. So it's like we picked Iowa State to beat Missouri. But when you really think about it, you're like, well, Missouri is a much better offensive team, and offense beats defense when you have two kind of elite sides. But everywhere else, I mean, the matchups weren't great for the SEC. And I think it's just a league that right now does not have the top high level teams outside of Alabama and Tennessee. I mean, those are Final Four type teams. I don't think you say that about anybody else. Um, it's not a great shooting league. It's literally 32nd, I think, out of 32 conferences in 3-point shooting. There's just not a lot of great shooting. Defenses are elite. They're not a lot of great. I mean, really, Alabama and Missouri, I think, are the two best offenses. But everyone else, I mean, you can certainly look at some question marks. Even Alabama, right? Alabama gets just stunned at Oklahoma. Oklahoma just handled them easily. So does Alabama all of a sudden have an issue? We'll find out this week because they have two very winnable games and two games they should win in blowout fashion. So yeah, I just think the SEC is not as good as we thought it would be. And sometimes, you hit on those, sometimes you miss on them. And this year it was a league that changed. You think about how many new coaches they had, right? I mean, there were 6 coaching changes in the offseason. Now Mike White's still here. He's been at Florida, he's at Georgia now. But 6 coaching changes, and that's not a regular thing for SEC basketball. So if you factor in teams just leaving a lot of good wins on the table in non-conference play, and just overall, I think a league that just really relies on defense way more than offense this season. It's kind of a combination where you're just not going to have many teams to this point that have just stood out, maybe to the level you thought they would. Even like Auburn 16-5. Yeah, I still have my questions about Auburn. They're 16-5. That's a good record, but it's the same kind of stuff, right? So that's it. I just don't think the league's good as we thought it'd be.
I feel like Auburn has the same questions this year as it did last year, and that's guards. Because it
Yeah,
feels like to me, the last 2 games have kind of been the same recipe. They get down by 15 early, they try to fight back in second half, but when they go up against teams that's got these very athletic, long, good guards that can, I don't know how many times the last 2 games we've seen Wendell Green get stuck in the trap
yeah,
by teams. That was a struggle. I mean, we know they can't shoot. They're not a great shooting team, as you said. No, hardly anybody
yeah,
SEC team is. But is that kind of what you're seeing with Auburn? 'Cause I think their front court players are good. I mean, look, nobody on their team is as good as Jabari, but I think they have
yeah,
actually they did a good job at actually replacing Walker Kessler up front when it comes to blocks, rebounds, stuff like that as a collective unit. But
yeah.
what are you seeing with Auburn? What is their issues? You think?
Well, I think and you kind of just said it, they don't have the ceiling offensively they had last year. And what happens is kind of what happened at West Virginia or against A&M. You get down big, like in both of those games, and you have to try to play your way back into it. Well, now you have to do it through 2s and 1s, not 3s, because they just can't shoot, and there's just no consistency. And like I've said before, I say that I'm like Auburn should never shoot more than 14 threes in a game. Like that's kind of my magic number for Auburn. Like if they start shooting more than that, I worry because I don't think they should. But when you get in games like this, if you get double-digit deficits, you can make up ground a lot quicker if you can make the 3 consistently. This team just can't, and I think that goes into the guards, right? I mean, who are just the stellar guards they have that can shoot? And I just don't think they have that a lot on this team. You think back right to the Final Four team. They had Bryce Brown. They had a guy who just, Jared Harper could hit threes, of course. He evolved his game into being able to knock down threes at a consistent rate. They just don't have that with this team. And, last year they weren't a great 3-point shooting team either. I mean, let's not act like they were. But this year they just it's more significant in terms of, I mean, look what are they shooting? They were shooting 29.5%. It's 342nd nationally. I mean, that's just bad. That's just not a good shooting team. And so I think their offensive limitations forces them to play perfect defensively in some of these games, and that's just not going to happen. It puts a lot more pressure on them on the defensive side of the floor, and it's like it's like if you ask the question, what is Auburn's strength on offense? What just if you're watching them, what just blows you away about Auburn offensively? I don't know what the answer is to that because I just don't think this team, like you said last year, if you ask that question, well, that's easy. It's Jabari Smith. And it's just having a guy like that who can take over a game at any time. They don't have that. They got a bunch of good players. I mean, again, I think some of their guys are underrated. Like, I don't think Jalen Williams gets enough credit. Um, I don't think Wendell Green still gets enough credit. But are those guys every single game, and you get in those moments, are they just going to take over and score 25 plus? It's just not. And so they have to be more balanced and they just have to be more consistent. And right now, I just think it's a lot. It's a lot for this team offensively because they have some challenges, and maybe that's what kind of holds them back from getting to that Final Four destination that every team shoots for to start the season.
Yeah, they feel like a team. I'm gonna throw a superhero reference out here. They feel like a team that's got a bunch of Robins, but there's not a Batman.
There you go. That's the way it is. Yeah. Um, yeah. And because like you said, I mean, you feel good about their post play, but all those guys can't bring the ball down the floor either, and
Mm.
they can't start the offense. And so, yeah, I just think those are the things that are going to come up with Auburn, because again, their defense just can't be perfect every night. And West Virginia, right? That game, Eric Stevenson goes for 31. He just has a huge game. Well, all of a sudden that puts pressure on you, and I think it's kind of the same thing. A&M played so well, ends the home winning streak. It's just a lot of pressure when you have to kind of have an inconsistency on offense the way Auburn has right now.
And lastly, not I've kept you a lot longer than I said it would.
Nah,
Just
it's
got
fine.
you
I
got
mean,
one more
come on, Phillip.
question.
We're doing this. It's like 2 a.m. now, isn't it? I don't know. So
That's right, everybody. We're
it's not,
going.
folks.
We
It's
should went
close.
live and done like a marathon at this point. Uh, but Alabama, the loss. A little like Brandon Miller got very frustrated in this game. They did a really good job on Hill. Jalen Hill was on, which he had 26 points, 9 of 11, 8 rebounds. Brandon Miller was 4 of 14, 11 points. But just overall for Alabama, like a lot of people were thinking, hey, this may be the best team in the country. You get a loss like this against Oklahoma. Any concern? What are your thoughts, Alabama? Now, how do they bounce back from this?
Well, I think this is a huge week because you can look at their schedule and say, well, how is that? They play Vanderbilt and LSU. To me, this is a mindset week because they didn't play great against Mississippi State. And so you start to wonder there, like, all right, it's just one game, right? But then they get blown out at Oklahoma. And you're thinking, okay, well, now we put two games together where they haven't looked great. And we really haven't seen that from Alabama this season. Like, we haven't seen back to back games where they just look bad at times. Now, again, they find a way to beat Mississippi State. That's all that matters. But now you play two teams that you've already handled. You beat LSU by 40. You beat Vanderbilt by 12. It was pretty deceiving because they were up 20 something, right, at one point. Um, so what's their mindset? If they struggle to beat Vanderbilt or if they struggle to beat LSU, I think then you start to maybe wonder if there's something deeper at play here. And maybe they're hitting that stretch that teams hit sometimes in the season, right? Where they just aren't playing well and something's not right. I think that's when you start to really question that with Alabama. So I feel like this is a big week for them because I just want to see what their mindset is. I want to see what their approach is. Like you said, Brandon Miller, have a bad game. How do you respond? I think that's what this is all about for Alabama because we haven't questioned anything about them up until their worst loss of the season, where they just did not. I mean, they're down 30 in that game, 32, whatever it was. That's just not what you should see from a team that was making the case. I was making the case for to be the best team in the country. That doesn't happen to those kind of teams, to that level. So I think it's how do they respond if they come back with emphatic wins against Vanderbilt and LSU? Okay, just a blip in a 30-game season. That just happens sometimes in college basketball. We know that.
Mm-hmm.
But if not, then it's like, uh-oh, I get something up here. Then I think that's when you start to maybe get a little worried about the Tide.
I know one thing: the basketball team got a taste of what it's like when the football team gets beat on the road because with the court getting stormed like that. I was
Yeah,
like,
Yeah.
Alabama getting beat, and then the fans run out on the quarter of the field. I've seen this in another sport when I was watching it Saturday.
Yep. That's what usually again we're not used to. It's not used to it, right? Like but hey, they've gotten to that point now, and that's something too, right? Like they have the target. I mean, on them, like they're the team to beat, and so it becomes a much bigger deal for everyone else, and all the pressure's on Alabama. So we'll see how they respond this week.
Yeah, absolutely. These football schools are now becoming really, really good at basketball, and it's good for the conference that that is the case. That more and
Yep,
more teams are in there, and it's not just Kentucky and everybody else anymore like it was a couple years ago.
that's
But
right.
Blake, I'll close it up on that. I do appreciate you coming on and talking all things the NFL, SEC, all kinds of stuff. It was a good weekend of sports to engulf and to take in for everybody. But listener viewers want to check out, where can they find you? Where can they check out Southeastern 14? Where can they check out Establish the Pass?
Yeah, I always appreciate it, Philip. I always enjoy the conversation, but like you said, all kinds of stuff going on. If you want the SEC stuff, southeastern14.com. You can find it there. Go to YouTube, search for Southeastern 14. We got all kinds of videos going up every day, football, basketball, baseball, all sorts of stuff. So you can check it out there. And yeah, Establish the Pass, any podcast app you have there, just search for it. You'll find it there as well. And everything else, you can follow me on Twitter at the Blake Lovell.
All right, Blake, sounds good. Everybody go check out all the great work he does. And Blake, I look forward to talking again sometime down the road.
You got it, my friend. Thanks as always.